What's up, guys? Freedom is Rebellion here. So, you bought a machine and now you need to learn how to use it. Well, I'm here to teach you how, one tutorial at a time. So, hopefully, by the end of it, you will be making beats like a pro. Okay? So, I'm going to assume you have already downloaded the software. The software is the computer program that tells your hardware what to do. And your hardware is working in tandem with the software. So you can use the software without the hardware, and you can use the hardware. Well, you can't use the hardware without the software. It has to be running, but you can create a beat completely on the machine without having to touch the software once it's plugged in. But it has to be plugged into the computer to be able to work. It's not a standalone beat machine. Okay? So, the first thing we want you to understand before we start talking about how to build tracks and start getting into loading up sounds and all of that, you need to understand your BPM, which is your beats per minute. You need to understand your metronome, which is the sound that corresponds with the BPM that lets you know how fast or slow your beat is and where to start entering sounds at. And you need to understand the grid. All of these things aligned together. They're very important because they're combining to help you to make a beat that's on time and that loops perfectly. Okay? So, if you've ever heard someone say they have bars, right? A rapper, I got bars. I spit a hot 16 bars. Okay? So, this grid is going to help you to understand your bars, okay? For every bar, there are 4 steps, okay? And if you see these numbers aligned here, they're telling you the steps in each bar, okay? So you see this one says 1, that means this is the first bar. This is 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4. Then you start a new bar. 2, 2, 3, 4. 3, third bar. 2, 3, 4, 4, fourth bar, 2, 3, 4. Then your beat will loop all the way back to the beginning. Okay? So right now we're just making a 4-bar pattern. Okay? Now you can extend this pattern, make it longer or shorter. I wouldn't suggest making it any shorter than that. For me, I at least try to start every pattern with at least 4 bars. Okay? And then when you get a little more advanced, you can start extending this out and making longer bars. But we're going to start right here at 4 bars, okay? Now, to understand how to count out your bars using the metronome and the tempo, I need to start playing the metronome for you. So I'm going to hit record here and hit play. Now you can hear the metronome, okay? Now, the metronome is playing according to the tempo. Right now we're at 120. If I were to move this tempo up or down, up, you'll hear that it starts playing faster. If I go down on the tempo, you'll hear that it starts ticking slower. You'll also notice that that line starts speeding up or slowing down depending on how fast or slow the tempo is, because it's counting according to the bars, according to the metronome, according to the tempo. Okay? So what you want to do when you're building a beat is to place your sounds on this grid according to the tempo, according to the metronomes, and according to these steps that create your bars. Okay? So at the beginning of every step, for instance, you might want to add an instrument in here. Okay? So for this example, I'm going to go ahead and load up a sound kit full of sounds. I'll teach you how to do that later, but I'm going to show you what a MIDI note does. Now, MIDI note is what you place on the grid, and it tells the software where to play a sound at. Okay, so if you notice, this says kick right here. It's a kick drum. And if I place a MIDI note in here, it's going to tell Maschine where to play a kick drum. I'm going to place one on every step. Okay, on every step I'm going to place one. I'm doing it right here manually, and then I'm going to show you how to do it using the hardware as well. Matter of fact, I'm just going to put half of them in here manually, and I'll do the other half using the hardware, okay? But if you'll listen to the metronome. See how I placed one in here on every one of these, okay? And I'm gonna count it out for you too. 1, 2, 3, 1. 1, 2, 3, 2. Okay? Now while it's still recording right now, I'm gonna go ahead and start placing these in manually. So I've got sound 1 right here, which is also corresponds with sound 1 right here. So I know this is my kick drum. I'm gonna add these in on every step that's missing here, okay? Now watch how visually you can see me adding these MIDI notes in here. Okay, so now I've got sounds loaded up on all 16 of these pads. I'm gonna start picking out sounds and I'm gonna start adding them in here and start building this pattern, okay? Notice how everything is aligning with the tempo and with that metronome. I'm listening to the metronome and I'm adding these tracks in right on the sound of the metronome. Now, if you'll notice with the hi-hat, I didn't add a note in on every step. I actually added in notes in between the steps. So this is how you get more complicated. Now, if you'll notice on this grid, I'm gonna zoom in on the grid a little bit. Now, if you'll notice, you've got these squares right here, okay? So these kind of less gray, little lighter gray lines right here. They're just separate steps inside each step. So you've got 4 steps inside every step, okay? So for every bar now, you've got 16 steps because you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 in every bar, okay? So if I was to add a note to every step inside a step, then you'll hear the hi-hats start going a lot faster. Okay, did you hear that? I'm gonna do the same thing using the hardware. I wasn't recording. All right. Now, remember I said I've got sounds loaded up onto all 16 of these pads. I'm just gonna start adding in other stuff, okay? On the fly, just watch and listen. Listen to the metronome. It's probably going to be harder to hear the metronome now because I have these hi-hats in here, which is one of the things I actually tell people when they get started making beats is to start with your drums and start with a hi-hat, because you can use that hi-hat, line it up with the metronomes, and this is how you kind of start building your tracks from. Because once you start adding a lot of sounds in, you're not going to be able to hear the metronome anymore. Until you get really good at making beats, you're not gonna really know how to keep the beat on time unless you put hi-hats in there first, So that's just a suggestion. You don't have to do it, but I would if I were you. Okay, now I'm gonna start adding in some sounds. See how visually you can see every MIDI note getting added as I hit one of these pads. And they're all aligned according to the grid. Every one of these pads is numbered and they are aligned with the numbers that are on this grid right here, okay? That's starting to make sense to you. All right, now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna speed the tempo up. Now that I have these MIDI notes already in here, I can start manipulating the tempo faster or slower. If I don't like the speed of it, I can speed it up, or I can bring it down, slow it down a little bit. So practice this, practice it a lot. Practice your tempos, your metronome, and your grid. Practice aligning everything, getting everything on beat so you can start looping your sounds and making them on beat. Now, one thing that I really do want to stress to you, because Maschine has added a new function in that when you start recording a new beat, you see how the length says auto? And on that last track, when I told you that I recorded only 4 bars, okay? Now I set this manually to 4 because if it's on auto, what's going to happen is when I'm recording, let me load up another kit, okay? When I'm recording, instead of stopping at 4 bars, it's going to keep on recording until I stop recording by pressing the record button again, okay? Now, I'm going to give you an example of that, okay? Now see how it's still recording? It's gone past 4 bars, okay? Now I'm gonna go ahead and stop and stop recording, and see how it recorded all the way up to 7 bars. If I want to fix that and make it loop at 4 bars like that other pattern, I'm just gonna click on that number right there and I'm gonna drag it back to 4 right there. Now when it gets to the end of the 4th bar, start it over at 1 again. All right, so that's going to be important because with the new feature, it's going to automatically do that unless you manually set it to 4. Okay. Now, another way to do that is if you understand the grid, you understand the metronomes and the tempo, and you know where to stop recording at, then if you okay, so like if you know where to stop entering MIDI notes at because you're looking on the grid and you know where the 5th bar starts, okay? And I'm gonna do that right now. Now I'm stopping, okay? Now see, it's still recording because it's on auto mode. It's still listening for me to add more MIDI notes, but I don't want to. But since I didn't enter anything after the 4th bar, if I just stop recording, it's automatically going to start back over at 1, okay? And it's going to loop at 4. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but it will. Trust me, it will make sense to you once you start playing around with this. So that's why it's so important to understand this grid and how it works with your tempo and your metronome, okay? Now, if you want to start getting into more complicated things like adding, like how I started adding sounds in here and all these drum kits and all this stuff, and how I'm adding new groups, we'll start talking about that in the 2nd tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and end this 1st tutorial. I hope it was informative to you, and I hope you practice this, because this is not the fun part, even though it's still fun. This is the fundamentals, okay? When you get the fundamentals down, you'll be able to pick up probably any recording software and start to use it, because most of them use a grid system like this with MIDI notes, okay? Almost all of them. So if you learn how to use this grid, you'll be able to pick up any other software and be able to use it to make beats. So stay tuned. Come back for tutorial number 2. And I'll start teaching you the rest of some of the functions. Well, I ain't gonna say the rest, but we'll start with another step, you know. So if you an important thing too before we close out, if you have recorded something and you want to keep that, just come up to File here and hit Save As, and you'll get this window that'll pop up here, and then it will save it into the projects folder right here. So what I usually do is for every month, I'll just create a new folder, name it, you know, and then put all of my files for that month in there. It helps you keep things a little organized. Name it, Save it. You know what I'm saying? Tutorial. Okay. Now you see the name of the file changed right here to tutorial. Okay. If I wanted to open that, when I've opened up Maschine and it starts on the new thing and I want to reopen this, I'll just hit file, open, and you'll see the tutorial is right here. Double click on that and I'll just load it up tutorial. Okay, that's it. Come back for round 2. Peace.